Welcome to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein from Connecticut Capital. In this podcast, we help business owners and successful professionals plan for better wealth outcomes. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to help you identify better wealth decisions to help you achieve an unfettered life. It's time to ask yourself, what do you want more of?
Hello and welcome to Unfettered Wealth with Eric Tashlein. Eric, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well, actually.
Good. All right. I know this is our first podcast of 2021. Man, we made it. Woohoo.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I know it's only a single digit change on the calendar, but it kind of feels good.
It does feel good. I don't know. Did you have any great new goals for 2021?
Oh, you would ask me that question, wouldn't you? It's I do. I'm going to watch less politics. I'm going to watch less news.
That's a good one.
I'm going to spend time, more time with serving my family, if you will.
Yeah.
It's been easy kind of to do that this last year with COVID and lockdown and all that stuff. It kind of takes the other things that aren't nearly as important kind of off the table in a lot of ways. And so that was something that I've kind of adapted from last year and just wanting to continue to do this year.
Hey, good for you.
I'm supposed to have a health goal, but I just haven't made one, man. I'll be honest. I just haven't been in the mood to think about weight and all that stuff. I'm still
What's all
reeling.
that soda you drink, Eric? That should be your goal for the year.
Yeah, well, I'm drinking coffee right now, so it's not soda, so that's good. But I think it's all the tamales I ate because over Christmas, my wife made 14 dozen tamales, and I'm like, good Lord, it was amazing.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. So I should probably look at that. How about you?
So I'm every year. I think I've lost and gained 1,000 pounds, right? So I've added my Fitness Pal to my iPhone here, and 2 or 3 pounds down from all my binging. So that's probably my biggest goal of the year. That and just improving. We were talking earlier about man skills, right?
Yes.
I think just improving some of my man skills, because I seem to be doing a lot more projects around the house. So last weekend I was out in the shed and I strung up this pulley system, and it probably should have taken me 2 hours. It was a system to raise my kayak.
Yeah.
And I think it ended up taking me 4. And I had drilled an extra set of holes. Instead of measuring twice and cutting once, I did the opposite.
I think we've all done that. Absolutely.
So that type of stuff, and being there for the kiddos for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that obviously in your realm, you work with clients all the time on goals and goal setting. It's not just a first of the year kind of thing, but I believe this is a very appropriate time to talk about what some financial goals are. And I know that's kind of what you're here to discuss.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's a great time of year because I know everybody's credit card bills are rolling in from holiday spending. And speaking of rolling in, Monday night, Roll Tide. Looking forward to Alabama in the championship game.
Right.
It's a fun time of year.
Yeah, absolutely. But most people don't like to talk about their goals, right, with other people, because if we make our goals private, then nobody holds us accountable, right? we can't lose necessarily through these conversations and through these things that you're telling and talking to your clients about. What are you hearing from them? Are they pretty open to starting off a new year fresh ideas?
It depends on who I'm speaking to, right? But I think by and large, when I look around or when I speak to people, I think people are struggling with, living within their means, or maybe there's a spouse that struggles with living within their means. And it's hard, if you're not partnered up with kind of the same goals. I know there's some frustration that can emerge and some arguing at times that you hear about. So, and I also think it's doubly hard these days I don't spend a ton of time on social media, but I know when I talk to younger folks, especially, these kids look around, they're like, wow, everybody's having a lot more fun than me. And they certainly seem to have a lot more money and spending power than I do. So you hear that a lot. And I think that's it's tough. I think it's tough for these younger kids growing up today, especially, as they emerge from college into careers and just trying to keep the spending in line. So not sure if I answered your question, but I think, I think today's topic is just going to be goal setting for sure, but definitely kind of living within the means. And how do you do that?
Yeah. And I don't know about anybody else listening to this, but I think each person has their own kryptonite when it comes to, something that they may purchase more than other things. So, little disclosure, my kryptonite is tools, because I can justify buying tools. Well, I need this. I need this to do repairs around the house. I need this to build something, blah, blah, blah. And my wife's kryptonite is our grandchildren. We can stick to a budget pretty well until it comes to the grandkids. Then it's just like, I just see cash flying out of purses and out of my wallet. And I'm like, man, these are not our children. Why are you spending so much money on them? But I think we all have our kryptonite, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And for me, unfortunately, I have a lot of hobbies. So, what I've been trying to do lately, because I realize like I'm throwing out stuff. And, I don't live to have stuff in my life, in my house anymore. And so I try to ask myself, I'm like, well, when I buy something, is this going to eliminate a negative in my life, right? And, the other day I saw this new Corvette drive by. And these days they look like Ferraris. They're beautiful. Yeah. Of course, everybody, has a degree of, wow, that's awesome. A little bit of envy. Wow, that guy's cool. Would that really eliminate a negative in my life? I don't think so. As cool as that car is.
Yeah, exactly. I can think of a few things that may become a problem. If I were to do that, I guarantee there would be somebody in my ear telling me how horrible of a decision that was. So
Totally.
Yeah. So living within our means, it's obviously we want to do that. It's a good thing to do. And we're not just talking about retired people, but people that are retired, they don't have extra income coming in unless they create or generate something, get another job or whatever. So right. I think it's even more important for them. But as far as habit forming, I think this is obviously it's a universal conversation. So what is your best advice?
For sure. So, figuring out what can you spend. It's not that exciting. It's kind of boring. People don't love budgeting, but
budgeting is so sexy, Eric. Come on, let's be honest. This is a wonderful conversation. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
Budgeting,
nobody likes it.
my thumbs are down. You can't see it, but they are. But knowing your financial situation, to me, I think it's definitely it's a superpower. It's empowering to understand your finances, and it's not Instagram worthy by any means. I just think sitting down and just kind of knowing, hey, listen, these are my fixed monthly costs. Here's my utilities. Here's my housing. Here's some of the variable costs. I'm going out to dinner tonight. In the good days before COVID, people would be going out all the time, right? So I just think knowing what you can spend and most importantly, fitting in saving as part of all that is huge for I don't care if you're 20 and out of college or 60 heading into retirement. It's really great to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hate the word. When it comes to Instagram, you've heard the word influencer, right? These influencers. And the problem is the word is perfectly identified for what they're saying. Those people that are quote unquote influencers, so often they are living these lavish lifestyles or even faking them. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's influencer who would rent a studio that is set up to look like a private jet so they could take pictures in a fake private jet as though they're going someplace and doing something amazing, because they want to post that for people to envy them. I want influencers to be the kind of people that are influencing people to do exactly what you're talking about. Live within your means, so you're not stressed, so you're not facing all these credit card bills when you don't have the money to pay them, when you aren't setting up your future for success. I would love for grandparents and parents to be influencers for their children and grandchildren to show them the positive lifestyle they can live with a whole lot less stress, without debt, things like that. So I'd love to recapture that word from those people that are just so fake to people that are authentically trying to teach and educate the next generation.
Yeah, no, for sure. Listen, I had baseball cards growing up of all my heroes. And I just think that there's people in this community that I'll run into that have businesses, they're good savers, they make an impact locally. And I'm like, those people are like the heroes on my cards these days. And I think it doesn't matter what level you're at. I think if you're doing a good job with your saving and you're actually able to make a difference. So I think if you're somebody that is, on top of their finances, if you're a parent, being a good parent, being a good friend, helping out in the community, to me, those are the real rock stars, right? Yeah. It's not the Instagram influencer. and who really is not, it's not inspiring anybody, really. Let's face it. It's bad, in my opinion. It's just kind of, I'll be an old guy, it's just bad behavior most of the time.
Yes.
I think getting back to getting on top of things for the new year, I think, if you're in the listening audience, if you're saving, by and large, 15-20% of your income, you're putting away some additional money for college if you have kids. I mean, to me, that's like rock star level. And I think it's hard. And you might need to work overtime. You might need to do a side hustle business to accomplish it. But I tell you what, like when I talk to people that are on top of their finances, they are a lot more confident, I think, going into any uncertainty than anybody else I'll run into by far.
Yeah, absolutely.
One piece of advice I want to give, and I've given this for, 30 years. I mean, even to some of my old dear friends. I'll give you an example. If you're 28, let's say, and you're getting married and you're thinking about buying a first home, some of the advice I've always given, and it coincides with living below your means. Let's say that you're both nurses and you're both making $80,000 a year, which is not hard to do in nursing these days. The realtor is going to tell you can afford a $400,000 or $500,000 house, guys. Of course, being on commission, they're going to tell you that. But if you can just maybe live your life on mostly that one spouse's salary and try to bank most of the others, I'll tell you what, it's life-changing. And I've seen people do it. Because let me tell you, if you can bank one of your spouse's salary for 4 or 5 years till kids come, the snowball effect is huge. And I've had a few people that have done it, and they get back to me like, wow, that is the most rock-solid advice I've ever had in my life. It's really life-changing. Yeah,
absolutely. Here's the problem is that the example you gave was perfect. Anybody who we're working with to purchase something, they're a salesperson. They are getting paid to sell you something. And when we purchased our house, I knew that we were approved for a certain amount. And I immediately looked at it and said, I don't want to even come close to what they're saying because I know what the mortgage is going to be. So we shot for about $40,000 less house than what they said we were quote unquote approved for. And when I made that very clear to the realtor, we had to say it a couple times, those were then the only homes they would bring up to us to show us. Because at first they were showing us these homes that, oh yeah, I would have liked it, but until I had to pay that first mortgage payment. So you're absolutely right. And it's so hard to do because you get excited, right? I mean, the emotion in it. And you've talked about that on the podcast before.
Absolutely. And we were talking earlier about, things that happen in the house. You had flood in the basement. And so it's just nice to have all that extra money set aside to be able to afford these things that come up.
Yeah, I'm not to the point yet, Eric, where I can just call somebody and say, hey, can you come fix everything? So I'm still doing most of it myself, which I kind of enjoy, but I don't enjoy it when it happens randomly, and that's the thing that people need to understand. No matter what your situation, no matter what you say you can afford or what a realtor says you can afford, things will happen. And then what? Then, do you want to be that guy that has to YouTube everything, which is me, YouTube and learn everything on the fly? Or do you want to be somebody who's like, okay, well, this happened. I'm going to call somebody. It's going to be fixed in 24 hours and we're going to move on. And I've got the extra money to do that. I'd love to have that ability at this point.
No, absolutely. And, so for me, listen, 28, that ship sailed a long time ago. No, but we kind of did that. And I tell you what, it made a big difference because, eventually, when kids came, my wife really didn't want to work.
Yeah.
It definitely helped. Sometimes people ask, hey, fine, I'm living below my means or within my means, but when can I upgrade my lifestyle and have some fun, right? I would say ideally, if you can grow some of your investment income and then spend some of that on upgrading your lifestyle, or if you do the side hustle like we always talk about, or working some extra hours, use a portion of that for the lifestyle upgrades. I mean, hopefully you're covering all your expenses easily and you're saving enough, and then you can upgrade at that point.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%.
You just don't want to be, ensnared by your stuff. And to me, that's definitely a loser for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing too, with social media, I'll talk to my teenage daughter and about, FOMO, right? And fear of missing out, or, the term, keeping up with the Joneses is more of our generation.
Yeah.
And, a good story to share. I have an older friend who worked for telecom. Every year, his closest friends were going on these exotic trips, and they're driving big, brand new cars. And, he's like, I don't know how they're doing that. Like, they're earning kind of the same that I am. Mm-hmm. And he would go on vacation, but it wasn't, they weren't exotic, right? Yeah. And then he told me, fast forward, he said, at one, he was in his mid-50s, he retired early. And his friends just couldn't believe it. They're like, are you kidding me? Like, they were in a lot of debt from, the lifestyles that they had lived, and really they had a lot of regret. And he felt like he was just so happy to been able to amass enough money to leave early. What he shared, some other things he shared with me too, he's like, I wasn't jealous. I wasn't envious. I really, liked my people, my coworkers, and, I enjoyed hearing the stories about the vacations. His whole mindset, and even today when I speak to him, he's just great. He's just very gratitude focused. And I think for younger people or anybody that's caught up in social media and what they're missing out on or what they're not able to buy, he's just one of these guys. He'd sit down probably every day, knowing him, saying to himself, hey, I am just so fortunate for the kids in my life, for the house, the roof over my head, and for all the good things that are in my life today. And to me, that just evaporates FOMO and envy. And I think it's a great thing that he does, and I try to do as often as I can.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember this goes way back too, to Thomas Stanley, Millionaire Next Door, and he'd always have that saying in his book, Texas saying, big hat means no cattle, right? And I think the crowds probably on Instagram today that my kids follow are likely in debt up to their eyeballs. Or like you said, they're sitting there in the fake private jet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Going nowhere. Right? That's the whole thing, is that they're going nowhere. At the end of the day, when their Instagram fan base fades off, or let's be real, when they grow up and mature enough to know that these Instagram models are full of, what? Right. It goes back to the cattle statement, right? They're full of what? Anyway, it's going to be a harsh reality for them, and they're always going to be trying to do something more, but still going nowhere. So that's a shame.
Yeah. That's awesome, Eric. Thanks for the. I love the going nowhere. That's pretty funny. So goal setting, working backwards from the end. I think all of us are kind of. I don't think many of us do a great job of kind of peering down the road and looking at what are our biggest goals. Whether you're retire, if you want to retire early, or if you want to lose some weight, like we talked about, I think just having multiple reasons to make it happy is important. I think getting, like we talked about earlier with the free spending spouse, I think you want to get your family on board as well with some of the goals. And I know a lot of experts in hitting goals will talk about the tombstone test, which not to sound morbid, but I think that test is a real force multiplier in terms of your goal setting. Because, I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, on your tombstone, it's not going to say, hey, I had a huge McMansion, or I was driving that kick-ass Corvette.
That's right.
It's basically going to say father, right?
Yeah.
Mother, friend to all. In some cases, if you live in Connecticut, it's probably going to be Yankees fan or Giants fan, but that's what's most important, right? And I remember on 9/11, when people were on their phones at those last minutes, they were calling their family members to tell them that they love them.
Yeah.
And they weren't talking about their lifestyle then, right? So that's where the rubber hits the road. And that always stuck with me. For everybody, you want to ask, hey, what would be written about you, and work back from there. And that'll help you, I think, to really kind of hit on the values that really matter.
Yeah, you said, not to be morbid, but I'm going to put it out there. I 100% believe in this. And working as a coach and consultant, one of the things that I required of my clients when we first started working together is I had them write their obituary.
That's pretty cool.
It's tough, man. It is tough. And I had clients that would openly cry on the phone with
Yeah.
me as they read it out loud, because they needed to read it. They needed to make it real for themselves. And it wasn't to be morbid. It was truly, what do you want said about you? And I said the same thing every time. This is not happening next week. This is not happening in 10 years. Mm-hmm. You have lived a good, long life. You're at the end of your days. Mm-hmm. What are they saying about you? So what it helped them to do was to be able to put in things like, they ran a foundation, because that was a dream of theirs, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to happen in the next 5 years, but they always wanted to run a foundation, a charitable foundation that they could do something, or they wanted to be more involved in certain charities around their community. And so in the obituary, they were able to write that in, that they were a huge supporter of such and such charity, even though when at the time they're writing that, they were maybe just supporting them very little, but they knew they wanted to. They took care of, I had one of my clients that said that they were the family was so blessed that they were able to pay for all of their grandkids' colleges in full. And that was awesome. One of her specific goals. And she wasn't near completing that, but she also only had one grandchild at 2 years old. So she had plenty of time. But doing exactly what you're saying, what do you want people to know you for at the end of the day? That helps you form those goals in a very realistic and positive way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think people just, they want to know that you care about them. They could care less what you drive or what you do for a living, for that matter. So no, I think those are great. And I think just, you see the people that really have done well in their lives and their careers, and they're really put together. I think it's, they're focused on, like you said, setting up a trust to send all their future generation to college, or doing something in the community, or frankly, just, it doesn't have to be that grand. It could just be maybe you set yourself up so that you can retire around the time that you could help out with grandkids, right? And which I think is an awesome thing. Or just, as we talked about earlier, I think having a relative that, has some health issues, maybe just going over there and fixing some things around their house. So to me, what's more important than that? Yeah. That's the real juice in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One story I was going to share about that. So my dad, I grew up in a blue collar family, as if you couldn't tell. And, I try not to swear on the podcast. Yeah. But he's a hardworking blue collar guy, and I can still hear him today. So, Eric, did you change your oil? It's very gruff. That's right. And anyway, one of my dad's friends called the other day, a coworker of his who was younger than him. He said, my father really influenced him to save his raises, when otherwise, this guy, a lot of fun, and he would have spent them easily on Friday nights, no question. Yeah. He called me last year and he said, he didn't earn a ton of money during his career, but he said, my dad had inspired him, to save all those raises. And he said, I'm to the point with my minimum distributions out of his IRA. He's like, I don't really need that money. And so what he's doing is he's taking those minimum distributions, and he has a best friend where he lives, and he's helping that friend's son pay for his college, which I thought was awesome.
What a beautiful picture. Absolutely.
Yeah, I thanked him so much, because I didn't know that story. He'll call me a time and share some stories about my dad, which I love, because he's been gone for 5 or 6 years now. Yeah, we were talking about kind of what really matters, right?
Yeah, Eric, what a beautiful picture. And something you said earlier, you had said fixing stuff around the house for somebody. And you and I spoke before the podcast that's kind of how I spent my holidays, helping my grandmother, my wife's grandmother, with stuff around her house that just had not had attention for years. We hadn't been over there. We traveled quite a distance to go see her, safely, of course, in the world of COVID. But one of the things that I fixed was that in-ceiling heater that I was telling you about. And she's always cold. And when we walked in there, when I turned it on, we walked inside the bathroom, and her eyes lit up, and Eric, her hands went up to the ceiling as though she was ascending to heaven. Thank God she didn't. She's still with us, but she did that. And because the warmth that was coming down from that heater, she had not felt that in years. And she was so thankful, and she wrapped her arms around me, and she goes, "Oh, thank you, Wedo." And I don't know if you know what that means, but it means white guy, basically, in Spanish. I'm the only white guy in the family. And it was that made the entire trip worth it. Right there. That moment, just that moment, warmth, heat, and then just small appreciation meant so much to me. And I know that the things that you do, in your community, this gentleman that, your dad influenced, those are trickle down effects that are, they're huge, right? I mean, that young man being blessed with basically a lot of his college being paid for, he never asked for that. He never knew that was coming out of the blue like it is.
Right.
And those are the things that are worth all the money in the world. So I just, man, this is a great topic for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. Especially coming off the holidays.
Yeah.
Concluding this, really, I would just focus on, it's funny, even in the grammar schools, they do it with junior achievement, but, the wants versus needs, I think even as adults, we all struggle with that. Mm-hmm. I would just say, just try to create some income streams for yourself to pay for some of that fun, which, listen, I get it. We all have toys. I enjoy my hobbies as well, too. But I mean, some people go overboard. I would say we talked about looking into the future and working back. I would say all that coincides with it. I would encourage everybody on this podcast, give me a call. Let's do a financial plan and let's get you there, right? That's I think to me, that's the most efficient way to get you set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things is that I want to reiterate to the audience is that never in this podcast did you hear, and I don't think in any podcast you've ever recorded, Eric, or that you and I've done together, never has Eric ever said that he's going to tell you that you can't spend money, that you can't have your hobby, that you can't. Even the goal of this, or the overall overarching theme of this podcast is, he wants you to be able to enjoy your life as much as possible, but do it in a stress-free way, because debt creates stress. And let's manage that money so that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish without going into tremendous debt or taking something from another area of your life. So I'm hoping that people hear that they hear your voice and your intentions in this podcast, that it's about enjoying your life, having a great time, but doing it in a responsible way that you can do it for your entire life, and not like your example of the gentleman that retired early and all his coworkers like, man, we're in tremendous debt. Well, they enjoyed their life early on, and now they're paying the price in a major, major way. I just think it's a beautiful picture, something that I strive for, and I appreciate you speaking into my life, on the podcast and even outside of the podcast, making sure that I'm doing the right thing. So, Eric, fantastic.
No, thanks, Eric. I always enjoy these talks, and and again, for anybody out there listening, if you need to reach us, please go to our website at ConnecticutCapital.com. You can give us a phone call, 877-1520, and reach out to me on LinkedIn, which I seem to be most active on in terms of social media.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Other than just have a great, healthy year here, Eric.
Eric, I wish the same for you, of course, and your family. This is going to be a great year. And for all of our listeners, stay healthy, stay safe. Please reach out to Eric and his team just to have a conversation and see what's going on and see how you can better your life 1 month at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 paycheck at a time. I know there's never any judgment. It's just conversation. So, Eric, again, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for today's podcast. And for you, the listening audience, thank you for tuning in and listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast with Eric Tashlein. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Eric comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And speaking of family, this is a great one for spouses to share together and have that discussion, or maybe share this with your kids so they can start, hearing your heart and knowing that you want them to live within their means so that they can enjoy their life a whole lot less stress, right? Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Connecticut Capital Management Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Unfettered Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Connecticut Capital. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. Content should not be construed as personalized investment, legal, or tax advice. Please consult your advisor, attorney, or tax advisor in regards to your individual situation. Eric Tashlein is an investment advisory representative of Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Connecticut Capital Management Group, LLC, and Connecticut Benefits Group, LLC are not affiliated.